That's what he's standing on stage telling you. This is not, British HODL on YouTube coming out with crazy, crazy stuff. This is the ex-managing director of BlackRock sitting there on stage in London telling you this is what I think is going to happen. I haven't even started
Crazy.
talking about my own opinions. If you ever look at my own opinions,
So,
I predict in my lifetime, Bitcoin will be the first quadrillion-dollar asset.
hello everyone. I am here with fellow Bitcoin bull British. We are finally meeting. I'm very happy with this. You are one of the most highly requested people for me to bring on my show. So I was like, yes,
Really?
they're
That's
right.
amazing.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
because
thank you for having me.
yeah, of course, happy to. I think that's because we're both hyper bulls, right? I'm always throwing out big numbers for Bitcoin and talking about that. Peter Dunworth is another one of these hyper bulls, and I think you're one of them too. You are you have quite the strong personality and quite the bold Bitcoin predictions and emphasis. So I'm glad to have you here. Let's like I was saying right before we started, love to talk about Bitcoin, the absolute scarcity of Bitcoin, what makes Bitcoin different, unique, how Bitcoin's price could skyrocket, the urgency for self custody, the importance of self custody, and just trying to share that message with new coiners and hardcore Bitcoiners and normies alike, right? So no coiners. So yeah, let's get into it. If you could start with your background, I know you have your real estate background, and when did you realize Bitcoin was unique and it was important and urgent, and how did you come to that conclusion that Bitcoin is this unique kind of asset?
Well, I had two moments. The first time I thought Bitcoin was unique, I thought it was a scam. The second time I thought Bitcoin was unique, I thought it was the most important thing on earth. So the first time was in 2016, 2017. I was sitting smoking cigars actually with my best friend in London. And we were like, this thing is a scam. This has to be a scam because our background is traditional assets, gold, real estate, equities, etc., etc. So we bought 20 Bitcoin each. And in 2 weeks, we're sitting in the exact same spots, and the price had doubled. And we thought we'd paid for 6 months of great cigar smoking, so we should sell. And we sold our entire position. Um, and then in 2020, during the pandemic, was when my second Bitcoin is unique moment happened, where I realized it was the most important thing on earth. I was walking around the park like a moron listening to the Bitcoin Standard because somebody that I really respect had now become a Bitcoiner. And he said, you need to listen to this book, then we can have a conversation. And so I was listening to this book, and Seyfedin mentions the idea of stock to flow. And having a gold background, the idea of stock to flow made sense immediately. And I, in that moment, realized I had fucked up. And so that was my second moment of Bitcoin is pretty unique.
Yeah. Yep, that makes sense to me. I remember having a specific moment. For me, there was a long journey when it came to learning about Bitcoin, but I remember the moment that it clicked for me, the importance, and it was the humanitarian argument of understanding, oh wait, this isn't just an inflation hedge. This is for everyone, because most people don't have banks. I remember that moment. I remember where I was. So for you, it's stock to flow. Okay. Very interesting. It was a stock to flow. So now here
Just
we
the
are.
idea, just the
Yeah.
idea of stock to flow, right? I'm not talking about the stock to flow model. This was before that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the idea of stock to flow being applied to Bitcoin made me realize that I was fucking up because I was looking at Bitcoin like an equity when I should have been looking at it like a commodity. And
Got it.
that instance, at that point, 16 years of experience just sort of lined up like the Matrix, and I was like, oh damn, I messed up.
Well, at least you figured it out, right? So from that moment, you started allocating into Bitcoin, and I'm assuming now it's your largest position. I don't know if you talk about percentages or whatever, but I'm sure, you're
Yeah.
you're all in with Bitcoin, and that's your worldview, right? So
Yeah, my portfolio is very simple. The way I like to maximize my ROI per se is 50% of the portfolio will be the core underlying position, which in this case is Bitcoin. Um, you know, a, a certain percentage, out of the other 50% will be a layer two return generating position, which for me is publicly listed mining companies. And then the remaining is a higher leverage, higher risk layer three, which for me is derivatives on those mining companies. So basically, the highest risk has the lowest allocation, and yet it's the highest return if it all works out.
Yeah, and all three of those layers still Bitcoin exposure, but just at different levels of
Everything is
risk.
Bitcoin. Yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
the overall portfolio is macro Bitcoin, and then it just depends on how much return I want to generate and how I allocate.
Yep. Yep. Okay, so that moment for you was the stock to flow as viewing it as a commodity, not an equity. If I'm someone that like you, let's say I'm your friend now, right? You mentioned how your friend became a Bitcoiner. You said I have to talk. Now you tell me I have to learn about Bitcoin. I have to talk. What's your 2 minute pitch for me as why should I listen to this book? Why should I study Bitcoin? Why should I start going down this rabbit hole? What's
You
your main
know,
pitch? Is it the commodity equity debate or is it something else?
I get this question a lot, like especially on different podcasts. Like, what's your elevator pitch for Bitcoin? And my response is very, very simple. It's like, if you don't realize that you have the single biggest problem known to humanity, which is every single penny you're earning is being stolen from you without you even knowing it, you don't have more than 2 minutes for that. I don't have time for it. So you better come with time. I'll explain it to you. I'll spend hours explaining it to you, but it's not a 2 minute conversation because we're talking about your money. We're talking about the very issue that's gonna allow your children to carry on your last name in this world. And if you don't give a shit about that for more than 2 minutes, then I can't help. Go watch a TikTok.
I love it. The elevator pitch is that it's not an elevator pitch.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. So, okay, so then I've watched some of your YouTube videos and I've seen you on Twitter all the time. You have a you do go on for half hour, hour plus for people. For those that are have a patience more than the length of a TikTok, right? So the main things it seems you focus a lot on the scarcity of Bitcoin. You focus a lot on the upwards trajectory of price, probably with the ETF and everything else coming down the line, BlackRock, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What are those main three buckets then that you do spend that time in? And what else do you focus on for people when it
Yeah.
comes to that?
I think it's extremely important right now for people to understand where you are in the life cycle of this asset, because the next leg of this life cycle is going to price out low single digit millionaires at this point. We've already priced out middle class, right? Middle class person trying to buy Bitcoin at $60,000, $70,000 a coin. They've had a really good moment in this bear market, but really they're priced out. Even $30,000 for the average middle class family is tough. If Bitcoin goes and surpasses $150,000, $200,000, you've priced out low single digit millionaires, because if they've got their wealth in real estate, which is what 90% of those people have, it's hard to go and sell a bedroom, right, to buy Bitcoin. And so then you have to deal with the emotions of liquidating a full property portfolio, which is a whole different discussion. And I've had all of these discussions with my parents, with clients, with everyone. So I know what these discussions are like. I know how emotionally charged they are, especially amongst families. So, you know, it's tough. So my main focus is understanding where you are in the life cycle of this investment, understanding why scarcity is important, and understanding what's going to happen to price. Because to me, the person I'm speaking to is not the person who doesn't have any money and needs to save. That's not who I'm talking to. My purpose of my YouTube channel, the purpose of me coming out here, is to talk to my parents, who are people who have immigrated into the United Kingdom, spent 35, 40 years doing the right thing that they were told to do. And at this point, their property portfolio that they've sacrificed for because they thought it would be the right thing to do for their two sons is now should be worth 50 to 80% more because of the amount of money printing that's happened that hasn't been absorbed into real estate. So my purpose is to help the person who has money, who has wealth, the 500,000, the $1 million, the $2 million and up. The benefit of social media is everything I'm saying, the person with $10,000 in the bank can also listen to it and benefit from it. But my intention is to help the people who are the millionaire next door that don't understand that they're getting railroaded by doing the right thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I fully agree with what you say. One of the big criticisms that of Bitcoin in general, but one of the ones I see the most is that, oh, if Bitcoin goes to $1 million or $20 million or $100 million a coin or whatever, most people will never own a whole Bitcoin. That's never going to happen. And it's like, my response, I just don't understand. It's like we're already there. Just like your point. I think top 1% income globally is what, 55, 60,000 USD after.
30 something.
Yeah, 30, 40 even. I mean, I think it depends what, if you're including who you ask, but yeah, that 30 to 50,000 easily is top 1% income. And it's like Bitcoin already is greater than in terms of USD, it's about 35,000 US dollars at the time of recording. It's like it's already greater than the top 1% annual income. And of course, if people only have a 10%, 30% savings rate, well, then it's already like 5 to 10 years of savings for a whole coin. And so it's like, yeah, most people are never going to own a whole Bitcoin. And then it makes perfect sense because there's only 21 million Bitcoin. Most of those are lost, most of those are hodled. It's like there were maybe like, so then this leads to a question. How many whole coiners do you think there'll be? I think there'll be less than 500,000. I don't think there'll ever be more than 500,000 whole coiners. I'm
You know,
curious what
I
your
don't.
guess is.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say sub a million, depending on how people react to the ETF and how quickly retail reacts to the ETF. But I would say sub a million. But the type of comment that you're talking about, to me, I call them $1,000 net worthers, right? Like I don't give a shit what they think. If you don't understand how financial markets work, you don't understand how assets work, you don't understand how scarcity works, and you want to make a comment like, "Oh, there's never gonna be, everyone can't afford a whole Bitcoin." You're $1,000 net worth, or get out of my face.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. So, okay, you mentioned markets and how they work. So, for the people listening that are trying to understand how markets work and trying to understand how scarcity works, they're not arrogant enough to, make these bombastic claims like they know what they're talking about, but they're actually trying to learn. They're actually starting from square one. How would you explain that to them if they've never thought about this before? Both the low net worth people and the higher net worth, 500,000
Yeah.
millionaires and up, like if they have all this money, they've never really thought about how markets work and how scarcity works. Could you explain that really quick, what you're
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah, it's very simple. The only reason real estate has any value, the only reason gold has any value, the only reason the stock market has any value, the only reason I collect watches, the only reason watches have any value is because of the scarcity attached to them. So when you buy a property, you are only buying a property because you believe that other people will want to buy that property and there won't be enough of them in the future. So therefore, the price will go up. So, really, in essence, you're not buying the property for the property's sake. You're not buying it just for the utility of the house, because that would just be you live in it and that's the end of that. You're buying it because there's the need that other people have for that house, and you're going to offer them different ways to gain leverage on that position. So one way to gain leverage on a house is by renting it, right? So you don't have to buy the whole thing. You're in essence gaining leverage on it by renting it. You're just living in that house, but you're now renting it instead of having to purchase it. And as a buyer of a house, you are in essence buying that house because there's not enough and most people can't buy it. So therefore, you're going to buy it and rent it out to them and profit off of the leverage that you can provide someone. So that once you understand that any asset, anything that goes up in quote unquote price, the only reason it's going up is because of scarcity, right? Once you understand that, your question should be, well, which battery do I put my money into? Because if everything is just a battery gauging scarcity, now you can assess real estate like a battery gauging scarcity. You can say, okay, there's scarcity involved. There's only a certain amount of houses being printed on a 10-year basis. You can then have a look at, okay, what are the likelihood of a government issuing more permits to print more houses? And you can have a look at credit cycles. You can have a look at what's the availability of the debt, et cetera, et cetera. You can gauge the quality of that battery through the demand and supply levers that are based on that asset. Same thing with the stock market, same thing with gold. And then you realize you get to Bitcoin, you go, wait a second, I can't move the supply lever. Whereas with real estate, if a government wants to fuck around with the supply lever of the asset, they can just issue more permits to build more, to print more properties, right? They can issue tax incentives, right? If they want to increase demand, they can lower interest rates. They can do a lot. They can do tax incentives on the purchasing side, like a 1031 exchange in the US. There's a lot of things that governments can do with both levers on the asset, whereas Bitcoin is the only asset humanity has ever known where the supply lever is completely fixed. The only thing that can be moved and adjusted is the demand lever. And that is very unique. It's never ever been seen before. And that's why, once you understand that scarcity is the most important thing, then you can assess every single asset and go, okay, maybe I need an allocation to the asset where nobody can mess with its supply.
Yep, that's a great way to put it. That as long as an asset has demand, then scarcity is the big determining factor of how valuable it's going to be, you know. And I think a lot of people when they hear your message or my message, they think that we're pessimists, right? They think that, oh, they only want Bitcoin to go up because hyperinflation and see societal collapse or whatever. It's like, oh, these Bitcoiners are pessimists. And building off what you just said, I think that point you just made shows that we're actually the optimists, right? Because if you're investing in gold, if you're investing in real estate, if you're investing in these things, you frankly have a certain you inherently have to have a certain pessimistic attitude. If you're all in on housing, it's you profit basically on the thesis that humanity builds less and less housing per capita. You know, the less housing we build for people, the less affordable housing there is for people, the more you make. And obviously, not every landlord, I'm saying, wants that explicitly. But when you back it up to that first principles, that's basically what you're betting on, you know, or likewise gold, or likewise watches, anything else. Inherently, you're kind of betting on that scarcity. It's what, you know, when Jeff Booth talks about infinite money and finite assets, or infinite assets and finite money, this is that kind of methodology. And so saying everything's going to crash against Bitcoin, everything's going to zero against Bitcoin is this like optimistic worldview that hopefully everything only becomes more abundant in the future. And therefore, to your point, with less and less scarcity, prices come down. So,
Yeah, I mean, I'm even more optimistic than that. I think you can get to a $5 million Bitcoin without anything in the world as it is today currently changing. Because if you think about it, Bank of America's, done this research where they looked at the dollar in multiple on the market, and for every basically at the peak of the last market, for every dollar that was going into Bitcoin, the market cap was going up by $118. That's very unique for Bitcoin. What that means is in terms of a market multiple, you call it, that's what you call it. It's a 1 to 118 market multiple. So if we want to get Bitcoin to $100 trillion market, Bank of America is coming out there and saying that it's only going to take $1 trillion and a supply squeeze. Right. And real estate is
that's
worth
crazy.
$330 trillion. Right. Gold is worth $12 trillion. The stock market in the US is worth $50 trillion. The bond market is worth $120 trillion. So anyone tells me that Bitcoin can't get to $100 trillion market without anything shifting, they're about to print in the US $1 trillion for the next quarter. The Treasury is announcing that tomorrow, I think. So it's like anyone who thinks $1 trillion is too much money to go into Bitcoin doesn't understand. And you know when that fake ETF tweet came out by Cointelegraph?
Yeah,
Well, the
I know where you're
market
going with this.
the market in that 30 minutes moved $57 billion. Do you think $57 billion moved into Bitcoin in the space of 30 minutes? Of course it didn't. You're looking at a sub of $1 billion moving into Bitcoin within that 30-minute window with the high frequency trading programs that we got. So Bank of America's bull market multiple, as I like to call it, could actually be bearish. Right, because
Yeah,
if somewhere between 500 million and $1 billion went in and it moved the market cap by 60 billion, like what's going to happen when $1 trillion goes in really quick?
yeah,
Then you factor in the fact that supply on exchanges is collapsing. Then you go into realizing that BlackRock is now here. Then you go into realizing that there's an 80% HODL rate in the bear market. So what happens when the price starts going up? Right. So, yeah, a lot of these things have to come into play, and you got to be a complete moron if you're arrogant enough to go, all of these things are coming into play, and I'm still not going to learn about Bitcoin.
yeah, yeah. That's the $1,000 net worthers, as you call them. You know, of course, you know, we're not mocking people for not having money. It's
I
just
am.
you are,
I am. I
yeah,
am absolutely, because here's the thing, right? Everyone wants to go on about, oh, Bitcoin's only for the world. Bitcoin shouldn't be for the rich people. Bitcoin shouldn't be for BlackRock. Bitcoin, shut the fuck up. Bitcoin is a monetary network. You know what that means? It's a monetary network, which means anyone who has $1 to put into Bitcoin is as valuable for Bitcoin as anyone else. So if you're sitting there and you got $1,000 of Bitcoin or $1,000 of net worth, and you're complaining that a billionaire and a billionaire institution is $1 trillion institution is coming in, you're the stupid one. They got the capital to put into there, right? You don't. And Bitcoin's a monetary network. It makes zero judgments. The only thing that matters is, do you have the value to put into Bitcoin? That's it. That's what's beautiful about it. It's not like real estate. When I was in real estate, I had to do deals in ways where people wouldn't find out about the deal, because if they did, they had the liquidity to take advantage of it, right? If I told them about the deal, they could walk in behind my back and take the deal. And so Bitcoin, there's none of that with Bitcoin. So you finally have an asset which has full transparency of information, and you want to complain about the fact that rich people are now coming. No, you're not doing that. Not with me anyway. They can do that with all the other $10 a month DCA gang members, the $1,000 net worthers, the happy hippies, the whoever else, right? The BlackRock bears. They can do that. They can all get together and have that moaning party, but it ain't going to be on my watch, because at the end of the day, Bitcoin is a monetary network, which means that, unfortunately, whatever you want to think, rich people need Bitcoin more than poor people, because they actually have the money. But poor people need Bitcoin adoption more than rich people, which is why I think it's also important that we continue working to cause Bitcoin adoption in the economy, because that is actually what will help poor people. If you're poor now and the only thing you're going to afford is 0.05 Bitcoin, guess what? You're going to be poor when Bitcoin's $5 million a coin, because you're going to be poor then by today's standards. So you need to get your shit together and you start creating value to save in Bitcoin and allow that to appreciate. You owning 0.05 Bitcoin and now high-fiving people, telling them that you've done the right thing and you've saved the world, is not it. That ain't gonna work. Maybe I'm the only one that's out here saying that, but that ain't gonna work. You better get your shit together. You better get to work. Better start creating some value in this capitalist economy we have. Thankfully, we have a capitalist economy, and start figuring out how to save that in Bitcoin.
Well, I think we have a quasi-capitalist economy with the amount of government involvement. But yeah, I fully agree with you. Still, we're not in a socialist world. I really like what you said about how rich people need Bitcoin more than poor people, but poor people need Bitcoin adoption more than rich people. That is a really great way of putting it. I think of Michael Saylor. His company desperately needed Bitcoin, because they're facing inflation. If you hear Michael Saylor talk about why about Bitcoin, it's because they needed it. They needed it for their business. The more economic value someone stewards and controls and has responsibility over, the greater the need for them to have that stability of Bitcoin. But then, right, you think about the rest of the world, you think about people in the global South, South America, Africa, wherever. It's like, you're right. They need Bitcoin adoption more, because the more Bitcoin adoption there is, hopefully the more stable food supplies, the more stable energy prices, the more energy, the more calories per capita. So I really like what you said there. I guess I'm still having trouble understanding what you mean with the, you talked about 0.05 Bitcoin. That's 5 million sats. I still struggle understanding what you mean there, because when I do the math, if there's, just to give a little more context here, if there's if it takes roughly 4% of the adult population demanding 1 million sats, which is a fifth of that 5 million sats, then to me, my view is that, if there's 5 billion adults, 200 trillion sats, you do the math out, that 1 million sats could be like a serious amount of money, if assuming we have that demand from people. If 4% the global adult population demands 1 million sats, there's no more Bitcoin. So I guess if you could elaborate for me, just because I don't quite follow, why is 5 million sats still poor in the future by today's standards?
Because if anyone thinks having $1 million net worth in 2023 is rich, you don't understand how money works, right? $1 million in 2023 is not the same as it was in 1979. In 1979, having $1 million was fantastic. Now, based on every calculation study I've read, you need about $10 million to maintain the same quality of lifestyle as you did in 1979. So anyone thinks who they're going to buy a bunch of sats, go to Bitcoin conferences, high five with the happy hippies, and buy shit pieces of art and give away their Bitcoin instead of holding it, you don't understand. Michael Saylor ain't doing that, is he? Michael Saylor's not out here giving away his Bitcoin for shit pieces of art. What he's doing is holding it as hard as he can, because he understands what Bitcoin is. All I'm saying is that if you think that you're going to buy, a future value. And by the way, in your calculation there, you're assuming that Bitcoin gets to $100 million per Bitcoin price, right? I'm talking about $10 million.
Yeah, correct.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about 10 million, a $10 million Bitcoin price, which everyone thinks is crazy right now, and everyone thinks that they're gonna have 5 million sats and be super rich and to save the world and this, that, and the other. You're delusional. Delusional. Build a business, get a job, create some value. If you want your last name to mean anything, get some damn Bitcoin. And until you do that, all of the tweeting and all the I'm not gonna give a shit who anyone is in 20 years. Right? I don't care. I know I say this on my YouTube all the time. I'm here for a short period of time because there's only a short window of opportunity for people to actually get to one Bitcoin, which is my main message. People need to do everything they can to get to one Bitcoin if they want to be relevant. Otherwise, you'll just be exactly the same as right now, where you'll need to protest with a group that has assets in order to get your opinion inflicted on the world. Unfortunately, that's just how the world works. The people with the resources are the ones whose opinions get inflicted on the world. And having 5 million sats ain't going to change shit.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, yeah, I suppose that I think both of us are right to a certain degree. I think 5 million sats is a lot of money, but I'm probably talking a far longer timeline than what you're talking about. You're talking about a much shorter timeline here. So what is that benchmark that if it's not 5 million, 10 million sats, it's that one coin level? That sounds like that's
Get to
in,
one Bitcoin.
got it.
I don't want to confuse anyone. I will always drum that, like, get to one Bitcoin or die trying.
Yep. Yep.
Simple.
Because we have the opportunity to,
Right.
which is the crazy thing. In 10 years, maybe a tenth of a coin is that goal for those millionaires that didn't listen to you, that are trying to figure it out. Like that goal is
I don't
perpetually going to
know.
go down,
I don't
right?
know. I probably won't
Yeah.
be here. I'll tell you that right
Yeah.
now. I probably won't be here. So, everyone can make their own goals up in 8 years, 10 years, whatever it is. Like, I probably won't be here, right? Because my future planning makes no sense in 10 years to continue talking about Bitcoin. It's like talking about the internet at that point. Who talks about the internet now? Right? There'll be
Yeah.
other things to talk about this is why I get, frustrated sometimes, because this is a short opportunity. And everyone's out here trying to debate whether, I should DCA or I should lump sum purchase. People are trying to debate whether, Bitcoin's BlackRock's gonna do this, that, and the other. It's like you got one asset that has actual finality of scarcity, and you want to sit here arguing with me about whether you should get an allocation. I don't want to hear it. Like, get to one Bitcoin or die trying. Simple as that.
Yep. Yep. I agree with that message stack as much as you can. To me, I hear what you're saying. I guess that'd be my shift is that, as much as you can. A lot of people, for them, their goal should be 10 Bitcoin. For a lot of other people, maybe they can only get to half Bitcoin. But I agree that one Bitcoin is going to be really rare, way less than a million people who have that
Do you
one
know,
coin.
Luke? Do you know?
Yeah.
When did you start buying Bitcoin?
2021.
Okay, so I was in 2020. In 2021, I went to the Bitcoin 21 conference, right? Do you know how many people I met there who were there getting drunk, high-fiving each other, et cetera, et cetera, and they were proud to talk about the fact that they weren't at one Bitcoin yet. That is a fucking travesty. You are talking about the fact that you don't have one Bitcoin. You're proud about it. You're here in Miami getting drunk, spending $400 a night on a hotel or whatever the hell it is, or even worse, living like a peasant in a hostel just so you can come out and high five and get drunk with people, and you haven't got to one Bitcoin yet. What that tells me is you don't give a shit about your progeny. You don't care about what's coming after you. You don't care about you. You don't understand Bitcoin. What you want to do is take part. And if you feel like you want to take part more than get to one Bitcoin in an environment where we finally have the hardest asset humanity has ever known, you need a therapist. You don't need the Bitcoin 21 conference.
To me, that says that they prefer more their consumption and the spending of their income than saving for their future and
They
considering the
like
future
being around
generations. Yeah.
people. They
Yeah.
like being. I don't care who you're around in 2023. I don't care who you're high fiving. None of those people are going to matter in 20 years if you don't have enough Bitcoin. Because whoever comes after you that carries your last name is going to be judging you. They're not going to be judging me. They're not going to be judging Luke. They're going to be judging you.
Yep. Yep. So wrapping up here, or at least transitioning on, I don't just pound the table on buying Bitcoin, getting to one Bitcoin, getting as much as you can. but taking the self-custody of it. Because not only are there a lot of people that are spending way too much on conferences in a ratio given to their sat stack, but they're not taking self-custody. So that's something you and I both talk about a lot. Could you elaborate on the importance of that and why it is so urgent and so critical people do that given these absurd numbers for Bitcoin, 5 million a coin, 10 million a coin, whatever?
Yeah, listen, look, the truth is, and with my background, I understand that most assets are not bearer assets. Whether you're talking about stocks, real estate, anything else, it's not really a bearer asset. Any asset that's truly scalable is not a bearer asset, at least not the way the population has deemed that it should be. So Bitcoin is the first time that you can have an asset that is scalable to $100 trillion that you can actually bear. It is extremely important that you do that. Am I stupid enough to think that everyone's going to do that? No, because most people will purchase, most new clients coming in into Bitcoin will be purchasing, the ETFs that are going to come out, because that's just how it is. Most people will be having exposure to Bitcoin via those ETF products. So you've got a special moment in history where you can actually take possession of this asset that nobody else can control. And I think everyone should spend their time learning how to do that.
Yep, I agree with you there. It's really important people custody those coins, and in case that we have that massive spikes, or perhaps when we have those massive spikes, in demand, in interest, corporate interest, fiat prices, whatever. Because I think, like you're saying, there's a very short window of time that we have, not just for getting to that stacking goal that one has, but also making sure that it's protected well in the event that that happens when people figure out that they've um, missed this boat to get to their stacking goal, right? So what do you think's the main catalyst? Do you think it's ETF? Do you think it's the government printing their own position? Do you think it's adding three more microsailors? You think it's a combination
No,
of all
I,
those
I
things?
think I think Michael Saylor is a one and done. So I don't think that happens again. He's an absolute genius and a gentleman as well, by the way. I've had the pleasure of meeting him. So absolute gentleman and a genius, but I think that's a one and done. I think the catalyst, I think the ETF is the single most important thing to happen to Bitcoin since Bitcoin itself. And I think the ETF will drive adoption, will be the next driver of adoption.
Okay. All right. Do you think do you think that 5 million happens after the ETF, or do you think that takes years, or when do you think that happens?
It's going to take a while. It's going to take a
Yeah.
while. Yeah, I would say somewhere in the mid 2030s, we hit that. If it happens sooner, great. None of it matters. There's a $900 trillion melting ice cube, as Michael Saylor likes to call it, without a single dollar ever being printed ever again from today. There is still a $900 trillion problem seeking a solution, and Bitcoin is that solution. And $1 trillion of that $900 trillion money and derivatives market going into Bitcoin, you're looking at a $5 million Bitcoin. Assuming Bank of America is right and not wrong to the bearish side, right? And when you look at, the ex-managing director of BlackRock, uh, people tell me I'm bullish. And I'm like, I'm not even talking about what I think is going to happen. I'm literally trying to translate to you what the institutional investors and the institutional capital allocators are telling you. He literally stood on stage and said, within the first 3 years, there'll be $200 billion coming into the market. Within the first 3 years, the 756 trading days in 3 years. You're looking at 200 billion divided by that. It's $192 million a day worth of purchasing coming in. Based on Fundstrat's research, it's taking about $25 million a day right now to maintain an equilibrium price. You add another $192 million onto that, you could be looking, and I don't think it happens like this because nothing's ever evenly spread over in the markets, but you're looking at a potential one-day spike from $35,000 to $198,000 to maintain an equilibrium price with that new purchasing coming in. That's what he's standing on stage telling you. This is not, British HODL on YouTube coming out with crazy. This is the ex-managing director of BlackRock sitting there on stage in London telling you this is what I think is going to happen. I haven't even started
Crazy.
talking about my own opinions. If you ever look at my own opinions, if you look at all my videos, there is not a single video of my own opinion. It's Bank of America said this. BlackRock said this. This is the impact if $1 trillion from real estate out of his $330 trillion moves into Bitcoin. This is what happens if that happens. I've never, ever done a single video talking about my own opinion.
You
And
do
people
that.
think I'm crazy.
Yeah, I'm the same way. It's like, it's like, oh, well, there's not enough money in the world for that Bitcoin market cap, whatever. It's just like, Bank of America, like you said, it's like I talk about all the time too, because like this is what they said when we were in peak FTX paper Bitcoin. It's like it was over 100 multiplier, 118 multiplier in that paper Bitcoin era, where the number of Bitcoin exchanges is only going down. This is the first bull market coming up where net flows to exchanges are negative going into a bull market. It's like
Yeah.
we haven't even begun to price in Bitcoin scarcity because up to this point, there's only been an increasing number of sats on exchanges. And so it's like, that's crazy to think that we're at like 0.1%, we're way less than 0.5% global adoption. And we've gone from 6 cents to $70,000 at the top with all the paper Bitcoin only increasing. And so for the first time, that's going down while simultaneously adoption is going up, while simultaneously, as you said, we have all these people up there talking about this. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah,
So
I predict in my lifetime, Bitcoin will be the first quadrillion-dollar asset.
I'm glad that you're taking the time to learn about Bitcoin, learn about Bitcoin's potential future value, both in terms of political currency units and on society as a whole. And I'm really glad that you're taking the effort to study and educate yourself about Bitcoin. However, I must make this message incredibly clear. If you are learning about Bitcoin, you must begin also learning about self-custody and taking possession of your own keys. This is really, really important. You can watch as many YouTube videos as you want talking about how Bitcoin is going to skyrocket in fiat price and how the number is going to go up. You can talk about that all you want. You can daydream about this kind of vertical spike action for Bitcoin. You can daydream about this all you want. But my encouragement to you is that this is not a meme. This is not something to be taken lightly. We can think that this is a good thing, and it is a good thing ultimately for Bitcoin's long-term adoption. But this is real. Okay, this really happens in countries. It may not happen in your country for some time. It may happen in a stair-step fashion, but this is not a meme. This is not a joke. And so, therefore, you need to take self-custody really, really seriously. Okay. I work full time in self-custody solutions for people. I help people set up their multi-sig vaults. I help people set up their estate plans. I help people with a collaborative custody partnership and collaborative custody models. Okay. This is a chart of the amount of interest we have at the Bitcoin Advisor, the company I work at. Okay. This is not me personally. This is the whole company. We've been in business 7 years. Not a single client of ours has ever lost a single sat. Okay. And we have a good number of clients. And this is our demand. My point in showing you this chart, my point in showing you this message right now is that it is increasingly urgent, increasingly important that you begin taking self-custody very seriously. I'm telling you, I'm on the inside of this all day, every day, 6 days a week, and demand for self-custody is skyrocketing. Okay. The kinds of clients we have, the number of clients we have, the conviction in the clients we have, it is only going up. Okay. And people are booking meetings with me weeks, okay, in advance. In some cases, over a month in advance. And we are in bear market. Okay. This chart right here is from October 2023. Okay. Like incredible low interest globally in Bitcoin. And our demand is still skyrocketing, it's still spiking. And my encouragement is that if we have a bull run, if we have parabolic spikes such as this, where Bitcoin goes rapidly upwards in terms of price, if we have these periods of time, okay, transaction fees are going to spike. Okay, exchanges are going to halt withdrawals. Okay, people are going to panic. They're going to smash by any price. Okay, it's going to be increasingly difficult to have any time with people to help you in your self-custody setups. So first and foremost, whatever you do, whether you work with me at the Bitcoin Advisor, whether you go somewhere else, whether you figure it out on your own, whatever the case, please start figuring out self-custody, hot wallets, cold wallets, cold wallets, single sig, multi-sig, whatever you do, just start figuring it out now because I'm increasingly alarmed by the number of Bitcoiners that do not have self-custody. So please, if you have any Bitcoin self-custody, but especially if you have a large amount of Bitcoin in self-custody, please start taking this stuff seriously because it's only going to be increasingly important in the future. And so if you like to work with me, if you like to hear my opinions, perspectives, and ideas on this topic, you can find me at the Bitcoin Advisor. This is precisely why I work at the Bitcoin Advisor, because I believe this is such an important topic here, okay? You can find me there. You can have expert guidance on how to self-custody Bitcoin, to buy, secure, and store it properly for the long term. We can have tailored strategies for you, what your long-term vision is, both for yourself, your own individual future, your retirement, and for your future generations as well. Again, multi-sig vaults, estate plans, all of these things for you. Okay, you can just book a free meeting with me here and the link down below in the description. Again, the first consultation is completely free where we can talk about your priorities and see if there's a value add both for you and for the Bitcoin Advisor as well. And again, Our goal is to help you have generational wealth for you and your loved ones and your children without losing sleep. Okay. And that's why not only do you get a free initial consultation, but you have dozens and dozens of pages of education about multi-sig, self-custody, how to store your Bitcoin properly, things to avoid, things to pursue. Okay. Again, dozens and dozens of pages of free education for you to be learning about this increasingly important, increasingly urgent topic. Okay. And then you can learn further about the Bitcoin Advisor and why we provide much more value for half the cost of our competitors. You can learn about all this and more in that link in the description, where you can book a free consultation with me at the Bitcoin Advisor. So again, whatever you do, whether you work with me at the Bitcoin Advisor or you try to figure out on your own, please just start taking action now. Because in a couple of years, higher and higher net worth people are going to be entering the space and demanding self-custody. Okay. More and more companies, more and more charities, more and more pension funds, more and more churches, all these things, all these groups of people, all these entities are going to be coming into Bitcoin very quickly. And they'll be willing to pay the transaction fees. They'll be willing to pay whatever fiat price and get for their sats. They'll be willing to do the self-custody as fast as possible. And so my encouragement to you, again, I'm glad you're enjoying these videos. I really appreciate you subscribing and commenting and being a part of these videos and increasing your Bitcoin education. But please, please, please do not stop at the end of this video. Immediately after you watch the end of this video, please start taking your self-custody seriously, whether that's with me at the Bitcoin Advisor, again, link in the description, or it's on your own. Whatever the case, please just do it. Thank you. So, $250,000,000. You said you're going to do a video running down the math. It's probably coming out by the time this is posted. $250,000,000. Let's see, 21 million Bitcoin. That's just under $50 million a coin, right? US?
$47 million, yeah.
$47 million per Bitcoin. Okay.
My
So why do you
lifetime.
in your lifetime? So break down the math, break down the logic. I'm sure people would love to hear why you think that's the case, right? And now this is your opinion. This is beyond the BlackRock. It's everything that you've been talking about. This is beyond that, or you're saying that it's in line with that still?
It's in line with everything.
Okay, great.
Everything is
So
in line with everything.
great. All right. So break that down for us.
Yeah. So firstly, I want to start off by saying that I know this is going to sound insane. Okay. For the average person that's watching this, it's going to sound absolutely crazy. But here's my thinking behind it. I think Bitcoin is at least 3 times better than real estate. Right? 3 times better than real estate. Bitcoin is infinitely more scalable than real estate because I can have a billion people in it. I can't have a billion people in real estate. It is infinitely more accessible. Whether you are a multi-billionaire or whether you are a person on the street, you can get access to Bitcoin. It serves as potentially the best long-term and speculative asset because I can hold it for the long term and I can speculate on the short term of Bitcoin. And there's no drawbacks to doing either or. So if I want to satisfy my speculative agendas, I can do that. If I want to hold them for the long term and have it as a long term hold, I can do that. Whereas, it's similar to real estate where you can buy real estate, hold it for the long term capital growth, or you can do short term flips with real estate. But I think Bitcoin is better and easier and more accessible for everyone in the world. It has very, very limited counterparty risk compared to real estate for institutional investment. Because with real estate, you got to worry about tenants, you got to worry about mortgage brokers, you got to worry about your financiers, you got to worry about your lawyers, you got to worry about the management agent that's actually taking care of the property. You got to worry about, the guy who's fixing the drain down the road just in case he causes a block up in your property, et cetera, et cetera. There's just a lot less counterparty risk from an institutional perspective. It serves as a great asset to build derivatives products on because you can have instant delivery of the asset. You don't need to go through legal proceedings in order to get that. You can build a derivative product on Bitcoin, and it serves as a better underlying collateral than real estate. And finally, I think all of this combined, the international accessibility of it, the flexibility of it, the ability for Bitcoin to be everywhere and nowhere at the exact same time, the fact that it is reliable of a network in order to build something on, I think it is worth 3 times more than real estate. And real estate is currently worth $330 trillion. Just 3 times more than that, you've hit your $250,000,000. So I know it sounds insane at the moment, but factor in everything I've said, the fact that once an institution understands that they can own Bitcoin and finance it anywhere in the world rather than just, for example, if you own $1 billion of real estate in New York, you're typically going to be dealing with either with one of the major national banks or one of the significant local banks in and around New York that has the assets and the team on the ground in order to assess the deal and finance it. Whereas if you know that you can put $1 billion into Bitcoin, make one call to JP Morgan, say, I want financing against this Bitcoin, and they give you a quotation of 5% to borrow against it. You can call a bank in Singapore and say, hey, JP Morgan's quoted me 5%. What are you quoting me? And they'll say 4%. Then you call a bank in London and they'll say, no, we really want the business. We'll give you 3%. What you've really done is, and by the way, they don't need a team anywhere in the world. All they need is someone to look at the blockchain and go, is this real? Right? That's the only analysis that you need to do against it. As long as you can sign a transaction, you own that Bitcoin. Yeah, I think it becomes the pristine collateral, as Raoul Pal has called it, over in my lifetime, and therefore it becomes 3 times better than real estate.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I love your point about how it satisfies that long-term urge and the short-term urge. Bitcoin is a long-term, lasts a lot longer than a house, right? If a house lasts 50, 80 years, Bitcoin lasts well beyond that because it's just numbers.
What's the cost to carry?
Yeah. Yep.
It's the cost to carry.
Exactly. Even
right?
more so. Yeah. Yeah. Shrinks it down even more so.
Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying. Of course, the market cap should be theoretically 3 times more in real estate, and that's in terms of today's dollars. Obviously, the printed dollars will be even higher than that. I think the counterpoint to that, what would you just say to someone that says, okay, you can make that up, but ultimately everyone needs a place to live. Why is a made up number? Like, okay, sure, cost of capital, okay, sure, market cap, sure, it's more investable, but the need for housing is greater, let's say. What would be your counter to that criticism?
I agree. Everyone needs a place to live. That's why we should significantly lower the price of real estate to give everybody a place to live. And we should use, if we should not collateralize real estate, right? Which is what we've done. We've added a monetary premium onto real estate in order to turn it into a financial asset when it should be a utility. Because I agree, everyone in the world should have a roof over their head, and we have the technology today to give everyone in the world a roof over their head, but we're not allowed to bring it out there because we would ruin the financial value of this behemoth asset that we've created. And real estate is a behemoth asset because it allows governments to control the value of their wealth within their borders, because you can't just pick up real estate and be gone. So Bitcoin taking the monetary premium out of real estate actually is good for the world. Now, do I think that's going to happen? Probably not. But it is good for the world if the monetary premium of real estate is drained and all of that is put into Bitcoin, because then Bitcoin is infinitely scalable, movable all around the world. And then you can go back to allowing people to actually live a happy life and put a roof over their heads and their children's heads.
Yeah, I fully agree. That this whole reasoning, again, that gets back to the optimist versus pessimistic worldview, that if we want real estate, it's like, yeah, sure, okay, you could say real estate's more valuable because everyone needs to live in it. But it's like, my perspective would be oxygen is even more valuable, right? Without housing, you die in 6 months when winter comes. Without oxygen, you die in 3 minutes, right? And so it's like, there's no monetary premium to oxygen. There's no monetary premium to water, or at least maybe slightly more than oxygen. But it's like, we should want everyone to have housing. We should want the premium to be drained. We should want Bitcoin's market cap to far and away exceed real estate. And so, okay.
In essence, and this is my same argument with shitcoins. It's like anything that has a utility attached to it, based on normal capital markets and capitalism, the price of it should be trending towards zero, because the more people that use it, the more people that utilize it, the more economies of scale you should be able to get on printing it. The only reason the value of properties goes up, it's because it's a financialized asset. It is more than a utility. It is a store of value. And all I'm saying is, now that we have the best store of value, we should probably use that for its main purpose and utilize and stop trying to, in essence, what you're doing is you're creating a Frankenstein asset, which is what real estate is. It's a Frankenstein asset because it should be a utility. It's a house. right? But we've turned it into a financial asset in order to store the inflation somewhere.
Yep. Yep. Oh, I when I talk about that we're living in the ancient world, that's exactly what I mean. We're in this ancient world where we're using olive oil and rocks and oxen and goats and like cheese is like our store of value, like the Roman days, except we're doing it with houses and government debt and shiny rocks from the ground, gold, copper, silver, tin, whatever, right? So,
Yeah.
okay, so $47 million if Bitcoin's market cap is 3x that of real estate. And you bringing that reminds me of a video I made recently of this $500 million Bitcoin, and I broke down the math that I talked a lot about the multiplier, like we've been talking about in this video, how market cap's downstream of price and all that. And of course, the specific number here, 510,714,000, is a 10.75 quadrillion Bitcoin. And so I guess leading into the question of, do you think even a $1 quadrillion eventually in nominal terms is, I don't want to say bearish because that's really, really bullish. But I mean, my thought is that, okay, British, what if, 300 trillion of real estate? What if in the next, let's say 50 years, our lifetimes, we double the amount of housing in the world, just theoretically, and then we quadruple the amount of dollars and fiat currency units we have printed? And then what if Bitcoin is not just three times that, but like five times that? I mean, it's like, when I think about it, it's like even what you're saying, as you said earlier, it might sound crazy to people. I just think about it, and it seems like even that in the right time horizon becomes not fully encapsulating of the opportunity here.
Yeah, because it's hard to quantify the upside of Bitcoin on final terms because it's hard to quantify the downside of the US dollar on final terms. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, great. Well, as we wrap up here, I think we've covered all the major points. I mean, what would be your final message to people when it comes to getting that one coin or getting that stacking goal? Maybe it's more than a coin. Maybe it's less than whatever it is, as close, as high, as much as possible. What would be your emphasis? What would be your emphasis for that?
Get to one Bitcoin. That's it. Everyone should put their focus on getting to one Bitcoin. Everyone should put their focus on understanding the asset. Everyone should stop trying to sell themselves the lie that they can't do it and figure out how to do it. There's people in the world that in this bear market, and I know because they send me DMs all the time, that have gotten to one Bitcoin because someone lit a fire under their ass and they managed to do it, right? That's it. My goal, on YouTube, again, like I said, already said, I won't be here for long because firstly, I won't need to be. Secondly, the message is going to run out of value because right now you can get to one Bitcoin. In 10 years, the only people that can get to one Bitcoin will be the people that are being advised by people like BlackRock. So, uh, look, get to one Bitcoin, follow the three rules of Bitcoin as I keep fucking trying to drum into people's heads. Just step number one, you buy Bitcoin. Step number two, shut the fuck up. And step number three, you get fabulously wealthy because only when you do that will you have the right to an opinion in your future. If you think, like I said, you're going to buy 0.0 whatever Bitcoin and think that you're going to be this important person in the future, you're not. Because unfortunately, as much as, we want to talk about how special Bitcoin is in a capital driven environment, the percentage of capital that you own influences the power that you have. And if you don't have enough Bitcoin, your opinion will be as irrelevant today or as irrelevant then as it is today. So your focus should be on getting and accumulating as much Bitcoin as possible so that you and your children have an opinion in the future. Stop wasting time.
Yeah, I talk about all the time about how money is inherently a value statement, right? And having Bitcoin is not just important for your well-being and your being able to survive in the future, but if you want to make a value statement in the future, that you have to do that. Um, I haven't seen you talk about time locking. With what you're saying about having this opinion in the future, what I would call a value statement, whatever, we're talking about the same thing. Have you thought at all about time locking or the significance of that? Like, what if you send let's say you have that one Bitcoin and you send it into the future 80 years when the block reward's like, a few thousand sats or whatever, right? Have you thought about that at all? Like, do you think time locking is going to be a component of that kind of future influence where people want to have opinions and influence on the future?
Maybe. I mean, in the future there might be, charities or things that people want to help that you can time lock into the future. Some Bitcoin right now that can drip feed that Bitcoin to them, or maybe you want to set up an inheritance for your children and you set it up, and then basically every 6 months or every year it suddenly drip feeds some Bitcoin into their portfolios from what you've held. Like that's all cool. But as far as like, do I want to set up a time lock? No, I think that's all, it's cool for now. It's cool to do. It's cool. It's interesting that we can do it, but I don't think that's relevant. What's more relevant is getting people to one Bitcoin, understanding that getting to one Bitcoin is the mission, because my ultimate time lock is my brain, right? I understand that I need to hold this asset. If you're a moron and you can't, help yourself but spend the asset, well, then maybe you need a time lock. But anyone who's actually sensible understands they need to hold the asset.
Yep. Yep. That's a good perspective. That first, before you can even think about time locking, you have to get the sats in order to be able to time lock, right? And then you need the patience in order to execute on that. So makes a lot of sense to me. Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for your
My pleasure.
bullishness. Thanks for the work you do in the space. Really appreciate your time.
No, my pleasure. And I just want to say congratulations to you as well. I think you're doing a great job, and I just keep banging on. Like that's all we can do.